Before we go into our interview today, I wanted to let everyone know we have a new sponsor for our Energy Question podcast, the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, or USOGA for short. First established in 1917, USOGA has been an effective and creative voice for the industry for more than a century now. USOGA is dedicated to educating the public, policymakers, and legislators at the federal, state, and local levels about the value of the domestic oil and natural gas industry. If you're in the industry and not currently a USOGA member, please consider joining the association as a way of helping it tell your story to the policymakers whose actions impact everything you do each and every day. You can start that process by contacting USOGA through its website, usoga.org. Thanks so much to USOGA for sponsoring the Energy Question podcast. And now on with our show. Hey, welcome to the Energy Question with David Blackmon. I'm your host, David Blackmon. And here with me today is an old friend, not an old friend, but a longtime friend, Michelle Bloodworth, who we used to work together on some projects back in the day. And she's one of the best people I ever worked with on anything. And so I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to interview you today, Michelle. Michelle is the president and CEO of America's Power, a trade association based in Washington that represents a lot of America's coal industry. So, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, David. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I miss our old times together. And I'm certainly going to make a trip to Texas soon, so we can catch up. But I have just as much respect for you as and vice versa. So I'm happy to be here and really looking forward to the conversation.
Be sure and wait till October or so before you come down here. It's a little warm right now.
Okay, I still remember the rodeo.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, for folks who don't know, is one of the greatest events in the state of Texas every year. And we had the opportunity, a group of us, to go to that many times together. And it really was a lot of fun.
It sure was.
Well, before we get into the question and answers about what's happening in the coal sector of the energy space in America, just take a few minutes to talk about America's Power, what you do, what your mission is, and who your members are.
All right, so America's Power is the only national trade association who solely focuses on coal electricity and its supply chain. And our members span across the coal supply chain. So we have electricity generators, coal producers, transportation companies, and equipment manufacturers. We advocate both at a federal and a state level on behalf of coal electricity. So we only focus on coal electricity, although our members span the coal supply chain. America's Power was formerly known as the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity, but we've been around for about 30 years. And we certainly support a diverse set of reliable, affordable, and energy secure resources because we feel like that's necessary for economic growth and also for national security. We are certainly support the grid transition. We support a gradual grid transition. We think we need all resources. That includes all fossil fuel, coal, nuclear, natural gas, also wind and solar. But as you know, as we try to electrify the economy, we're going to need all these existing resources and more. And we certainly don't need to eliminate kind of this administration's emphasis on eliminating all fossil fuels.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to need everything. We definitely will need more of everything, a lot more of it to meet these crazy goals the administration's setting out for electric vehicles and all this other stuff that they're trying to subsidize into existence. Of course, I spent a lot of time reviewing my guests' websites, and one of the factoids on your website talks about the fact that today, the coal fleet, generation fleet, consists of about 400 units now in 42 states. And I'm just curious, what was the size of that fleet? You know, we all know that President Obama started the war on coal back during his first term. What was the size of that fleet before that war on coal generation was begun?
Yeah, so the coal fleet peaked in 2011, we had about 317,000 megawatts of coal generation, about 1,000 generating units. Certainly, fast forward to today, we have about 400 units, and about we're down to 188,000 megawatts, which is a drop of about 41% of the entire coal fleet.
Wow. I guess probably the majority of that's probably been replaced with natural gas, but of course, a lot of it also with renewables, wind and solar, right?
Right.
But most of it's been natural gas generation that's probably replaced it.
Correct. Until probably, certainly with all these subsidies for wind and solar,
Yeah.
obviously penetration of wind and solar is also increasing, putting pressure on all thermal resources as well because of those subsidies.
So out of those 400 generation units that exist now, how many are slated to be retired over the next few years?
In 2030, we expect 80,000 coal plants have announced retirement. We track coal retirements very closely, but those are public announcements. But unfortunately, we expect those retirements to be even greater because of EPA regulations that certainly are going to put a tremendous pressure on the coal fleet and all fossil fuels. Which is why many are talking about how we're headed for a reliability crisis.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we've experienced that quite a lot here in Texas. I think when you and I were working on the project we worked on 12 years ago now, we had something over 30 remaining coal units in the state that were operative at that time. And that number's been cut in half. And we haven't built the needed natural gas capacity to replace it with reliable 24/7 energy. And so we've had these experiences the last few years with real severe issues around reliability. And it's really no secret why that's happening, is it?
No, I mean, and it really defies common sense, it defies the physics. But right now, our energy strategy is really being driven by biased preferences and wishes rather than realistic considerations. And, you know, in the past, electricity experts and even past administrations, they have all recognized the need of thermal generation, fossil resources, including coal. You know, there's certainly a lot of discussion about the coal fleet. There's a lot of challenges to the coal fleet, but also, even though we support wind and solar, they are intermittent and they're dependent on the weather. There's a lot of reasons why we need a coal fleet. And again, we support an all of the above, a genuine all of the above, but the coal fleet has a lot of attributes that until we have other technology, maybe someday hydrogen, maybe carbon capture, maybe advanced nuclear, but we don't have long duration battery storage. And so we still need resources like coal that have those attributes. You know, the coal fleet has high accredited capacity, 90%.
Right.
You know, it's 5 times more dependable than wind, and it's twice as dependable as solar because you need 5 times more the megawatts, and you still don't have the same attributes that the coal fleet. And like you said, the coal fleet does provide fuel security. So most coal plants have at least 2 months of on-site stockpiles of coal.
Yeah.
And so when you have certainly when we had Storm Uri here in Texas, and we just recently had Storm Elliott, the coal fleet was able to help when natural gas supplies were disrupted. There were a lot of challenges, and PJM, that's the largest grid operator in the United States.
Right.
PJM and MISO house the largest amount of coal. And so coal was able to provide 40% of the incremental electricity demand, certainly when the weather got really, really cold, because it does have on-site fuel. And certainly wind and solar also had their challenges, especially during the 23rd and the 24th. You know, the coal fleet also provides optionality. You know, when either the weather is resources that are dependent of the weather and they're not available, or again, when either natural gas is not available or too expensive. And I would agree with you that, each coal plant that goes away puts more and more pressure on the natural gas infrastructure. And so coal can also help to complement natural gas until there is adequate infrastructure. And certainly we're seeing a lot of permitting issues and challenges, as many utilities are also saying, well, I'm getting so much pressure to build renewables, I don't want to put the money into fossil fuel plants that may not be here, given the Biden administration's goals of 2035.
Yeah, and you mentioned long-term storage for solar and wind a minute ago, and we hear a lot, and I hear it all the time from proponents of renewables, and I don't have anything against renewables as long as they're properly managed. Talking about, well, if we just back them up with batteries, they can just easily displace thermal energy and nuclear. And but the reality is that right now, with technology as it exists, we don't have long-term storage, really of any viable, scalable kind for solar and wind, do we?
No, and even, Jim Robb recently testified at a Senate Energy Committee hearing. He's the CEO of NERC. He's responsible for the reliability of the bulk power system. And he made the same comment that, right now we just have 4-hour long duration battery storage. And the pace and this disorderly retirement of thermal resources is really elevating. 2/3 of the country is at elevated risk of blackout. And he said, if these policies, also including these environmental regulations, continue, and we continue to see thermal resources retiring at a greater pace than we can replace of the same value, the same attributes, essential reliability services, then the entire United States is going to be at elevated risk of blackout.
Right.
Also, the US EIA predicted too, we've got about 4,000 megawatts of 4-hour, short duration battery storage. But to achieve the Biden administration's goals, if we're going to be 100% decarbonized by 2035, we're going to have 350,000 megawatts of battery storage. We've seen all of the supply chain challenges. Obviously, China controls a lot of the critical minerals. There's challenges with getting those developed here. And again, we just feel like setting these, date certain timelines of given this administration's goals of 2035, they're just not realistic and they're not achievable.
And you and I have both been through it in the business world. It's great to have goals. But in the business world, responsible management teams at companies that succeed also talk about the fact that your goals need to be achievable and realistic. And this administration is setting goals that simply are not achievable and realistic, isn't it?
No. And so, there's a lot of challenges with the grid transition. I mean, just to name a couple of them. So we think about, EPRI recently did a study looking at if we're going to completely achieve net zero by 2035 in the power sector, we're going to have to add 1 million megawatts of wind, solar, and battery storage. 1 million, the size of the entire US electricity generation fleet.
I mean, it's just laughable.
It's 1 million megawatts. And that's going to cost $1 trillion. I mean, are consumers really ready and willing? Do they really understand that? That's just generation. Most of
then there's transmission, right?
Right. We're going to have to double or triple the size of the transmission. I mean, that could be another $1 trillion. And so, even with the Inflation Reduction Act, consumers are either going to pay that through their income taxes, or they're going to pay it in high, extremely high electricity bills.
Right. Well, one of the points I make a lot is that about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the infrastructure law also had a couple of $100 billion in green subsidies in it is the fact that that law, the IRA, was not full funding of all of this. It was a down payment. And to actually fully fund all the stuff the administration's talking about with subsidies and incentives, you're going to have 20 or 30 more bills the size of the IRA. And that's according to the most modest estimates of the full cost of this. So it's crazy. Another thing that's going to happen that's really relevant to your generation fleet to get just to account for the bigger load that EVs are supposedly going to be putting on the grid by 2032, we're going to have to build out 47,000 miles of new high capacity transmission to get all the generation from these big wind and solar projects to the market centers. And I mean, talk about the challenge in expanding the transmission grid like that.
Well, and high voltage transmission typically takes 15 to 17 years.
Yeah.
In the United States, we build about, on average, 1,800 miles of transmission. So in order
annually,
to
every year,
triple
right?
the size,
Yeah,
that would take more than 60 years, yet the goal is in less than 10. It's just not, from an engineering standpoint, it's just not feasible.
well, I wanted to, you guys released the video yesterday, and unfortunately, I'm not able to play it here, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what the video's about and what you're trying to achieve with that.
Yeah, so we're launching a new initiative called Dependable Power First, and we're really trying to educate and raise awareness, certainly about the accelerated loss of dispatchable resources, what it really takes to keep the lights on. Again, all resources are going to be needed, but we don't need to eliminate any of those. I mean, when you think about how many years supply, we've got 300 years supply of coal. We've probably got over 70 years of natural gas. That has made us energy independent. So to me, for this country to go backwards, we all can develop technology, and certainly we all want to have a clean environment, but we need to do that through technology and innovation, not in regulatory policies that certainly are going to harm this country and make us uncompetitive from a national standpoint and a global standpoint.
Well, just so everyone knows, by the time you view this, what I'm going to do is in the show notes, post up the link to that video so everyone can have a chance to take a look at it. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is this North American Electric Reliability Corporation's 2023 Summer Reliability Assessment. This is a pretty concerning assessment, isn't it?
I mean, it's a very concerning assessment, and it's certainly, we review closely all of NERC's annual summer reliability assessments and have for probably the past decade. And these assessments, the risk is just continuing to grow and grow. Jim Robb recently told the Senate Energy Committee that, our assessments are demonstrating that we are operating closer to the edge when more frequent and serious disruptions are likely to increase. Even the CEO of MISO, the 15 states in the Midwest, as you know, I used to work for MISO and have a lot of experience with them. And they are showing capacity shortfall, given what they think they can get through the queue, what their utilities plan to build, not only now, but through 2040. PJM's CEO also recently said that, these state and federal policies, he hopes that, this administration and EPA will make sure that they do reliability analysis. They really understand what these regulations are going to do. And they're also showing shortfall as early as 2027, 2028, and that does not take into account the carbon rule.
Another aspect of this, and I've interviewed several people who are very concerned about it, is even if you could feasibly build the transmission, for example, that many miles of transmission. Right now, we have supply chain issues that are really gumming up the ability to get these big projects done. One that's just really bordering on a national emergency now is this shortage of transformers, particularly the high capacity transformers that are an integral part of any transmission project. I mean, I've had a couple of people tell me it's taking years in many cases to source those transformers for these projects. I'm sure your members are as concerned about it as anyone, right?
No, they are extremely concerned, and even those that are developing, wind and solar, they're saying, Michelle, we're short of capacity because of supply chain issues related to wind and solar. And, even in PJM, their queue is backed up 5 to 6 years, and it's been interesting to watch, not a lot of people like to say the word coal. But it's been interesting to watch these grid operators, talk about and really even tell their utilities, guys, these retirements are just happening at too fast of a pace, and we really need to roll back. We have seen about 12 different companies have rolled back retirement dates because of the fact that the shortfall of capacity and also the loss of essential reliability services that gas and coal provide.
Well, and talking about coal specifically, and the fact that people don't want to say it because it's become, just like hydraulic fracturing, kind of a cuss word in the energy space, right? People just don't want to say it. People don't understand. I think very few Americans understand how much cleaner coal generation is today than it was, say, 20 years ago, really even 10 years ago. I mean, talk about how much of the actual pollution that coal plants, the typical coal plant, has been able to scrub out of its, operations in recent years with the advancement of technology.
I mean, every coal plant is extremely well controlled, and coal utilities and generators, I mean, they've spent over $100 billion on all types of advanced pollution control equipment. They're certainly in compliance with all EPA regulations, even on the mining side. I mean, when you think about the coal supply chain in the mining industry, I mean, that industry is very capital intensive, and we need to keep that supply chain healthy. But they've invested a lot of money in advanced mining equipment, certainly to reduce the environmental footprint. When I think about all these storms and all these coal miners, they were doing everything they could on Christmas and the day after to make sure, that coal was delivered to that plant. Certainly the coal industry supports about 160,000 jobs. They're very good, high-paying jobs. And those workers have a lot of experience, and they're very technology, and certainly they're all concerned about the environment, but they know that what they do and the importance of coal electricity needs to continue to be a part of this energy mix.
So one of the big, I think, growth spaces right now, anyway, coming out of the incentives in the IRA, is a move by many big companies to move into the carbon capture space, and some people hold out the potential for carbon capture and storage as a means of capturing the remaining emissions that come out of coal-fired power plants. And I wonder what how your group views the feasibility of using carbon capture in conjunction with coal generation.
Yeah, so right now we have four members who are pursuing carbon capture. So we have 2 coal producers. One of those is looking at a waste coal project in Pennsylvania. Then we have another coal producer who has just been awarded a feed study for the Department of Energy in the West, there's a Four Corners coal plant. It's an older coal plant that some utilities were trying to close, but it supports and is a major economic driver for that state and for the community. And so they are pursuing it. And then we have 2 one in Wyoming and one in North Dakota And we also, well, we have 5. We have another one in Illinois. However, one of the reasons why we are strongly opposed to the carbon rule, the Clean Power Plan 2.0, is because that technology, it takes a long time to develop. It has not been widely demonstrated. People are pursuing, and we're supportive of that. But just on an average size coal plant, that investment is about $1 billion. It typically takes 9 or 10 years to develop. And, there's been a lot more investment in wind and solar, say, than in carbon capture. But you've also got to have all of the CO2 pipelines. You've got to be able to have it permitted. Not every coal plant has the geography to be able to install carbon capture. That's why we feel like we need to let industry innovate instead of mandate and regulate, date certain retirement.
What a concept.
Technology.
Oh, no, and that makes total sense. But yeah, these politicians don't seem to have the ability to actually recognize that the people in the industry are the innovators, and they're the problem. And another thing I write about a lot that I suspect you probably agree with is the fact that everything we're doing in the United States, and we're doing a great job of cutting emissions and getting pollution, out of our atmosphere, out of our water. But everything we do in this emission space is futile unless you can get China and India and other countries around the world to engage in the same kind of process. And so while we're, attacking our coal fleet here in the United States, China's not doing that at all. China is actually pretty dramatically expanding its own fleet, right?
Yeah, so China has the largest coal fleet in the world. And China has added 6 times more coal capacity during 2010 to 2022 than the US has retired over that same period. So China is adding more than the entire US coal fleet. And a lot of people don't understand. I mean, we could retire every coal plant in the United States, and it would reduce greenhouse gas emissions less than 1%. It does not have an impact. I mean, you got China adding, you've got Japan adding coal plants.
And a lot of other countries
again,
too.
They're electrifying their economy, and they certainly have a lot of manufacturing, and they think it's important to have coal to have affordable and reliable electricity.
Well, yeah, and it's been, coal has long been the generation fuel of choice in most developing countries because it's readily available, it's affordable, it's scalable very rapidly, and to think you're going to turn that around in 8 or 10 years is just, and there's just nothing that's truly viable universally to displace it. And so it just, the whole thing is just very poorly organized and thought out. And I just, I'm afraid we're kind of headed for a bit of a energy crisis in the years to come, as we move too fast to destroy the energy system we have without having truly viable alternatives to fill in the gaps. But I don't want to close on a negative light. Okay. We're running up against time. And as a last question, just talk about, where do you think we go from here? What do you view as an optimistic outlook for the future in the coal space?
Yeah, well, coal still provides 20% of the electricity, so it still provides an important mix. We are seeing, we work a lot in these wholesale electricity markets, and we are seeing market reforms to really value the attributes. MISO identified 6, coal provides 5, natural gas provides a lot of those as well. And those are the attributes that the resources that are replacing them do not have. And so those are the ones that they're more concerned, not just only now, but into the future. And so we see if those attributes are compensated, that certainly is going to help avoid premature coal retirements. We are also working with our friends in Congress. We don't feel like the EPA has done reliability analysis, and so we're just asking that EPA and that Congress ensure that reliability analysis with the experts like NERC and like PJM and MISO, that's done, say, before not only the carbon rule, but the 5 other environmental rules that we feel like could cause an unavoidable reliability crisis. But we also, there's a SPUR Act that Senator Barrasso has also introduced in permitting reform that would ensure that reliability analysis is done, but also that it would give a timeline and a date certain for these grid operators. It's hard for them. It takes a long time to do market reforms because stakeholders all have different opinions. And we think that legislation with date certain requiring FERC that they identify and value those attributes certainly will help both natural gas, nuclear, and coal. And in some ways, to me, it'll help also develop technology, we hope, like CCS. So there certainly will be a coal fleet of the future.
Well, that's good to know. We're going to need it. We can't have energy security without it. I think it's pretty clear. And I can't thank you enough for being my guest today, Michelle. It's so great to see you.
Thanks, David. It's so good to see you too.
And that's it for this episode of the Energy Question. I want to thank the Sandstone Group for hosting our podcast, the U.S. Oil and Gas Association for sponsoring it, and our extraordinary producer, Eric Perel. Thanks for all you do. This is David Blackmon signing off for now.